Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
And good Monday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 9th of November. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, whether that's on Marine VHF or the NOAA Weather Radio in your region. You can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska or call the Weather Info line at 800-472-0391. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. On Facebook, we've talked about incoming weather systems that are going to have pretty big and continued impact on the West Coast and the Aleutians for the next couple days. And on Twitter, folks from Southeast can get information about the next wave of storms coming your way. So no matter where you are in Alaska, there's weather information for you on social media in between the shows on Alaska Weather and our 24/7 web service there at weather.gov/Alaska. Let's get right to it. Out across the west, winter weather advisories are what you see mostly shaded in yellow here. This is expectations of snow, anywhere from about 4 to 5 inches of snow across the lower Kobuk and Noatak and Koyukuk valleys there into the Seward Peninsula. And many areas will see increased winds, probably on the order of 35 to maybe 40 miles per hour, and reduced visibility as that happens. The areas shaded in red here, though, are coastal flood warnings. And in those regions, we're expecting that push of water to reach upwards of 6 to 8 feet. A lot of that happening this evening. So in the next several hours, that will probably be at its worst before it starts to improve as we go through the early morning hours of Tuesday, and then gradually improve even more as we get into the afternoon Tuesday and into Wednesday. That warning extends all the way southward toward the Yukon Delta because a very strong area of low pressure is right about here, and that is pushing that water right into Norton Sound. That trend will continue as we go through tonight and into tomorrow before improving again as we head into Wednesday. A look a little bit further south shows another area under warnings. That's the central and eastern Aleutians. There's another wave of low pressure working in from the north and west Pacific. That will combine with the cold air dropping southward and create some very powerful winds. Hurricane force wind warnings out across the central and eastern Aleutians. The marine areas under hurricane force wind warnings. That will continue for tonight and into tomorrow. So plan ahead. For the central Aleutians, you'll start with winds coming in from more of the south as we get into tonight and tomorrow. Those will become a little bit stronger from the west and really pick up during the daytime. We're looking for gusts there upwards of 80 miles per hour for the central and the eastern Aleutians, I should say, for the east, and that includes Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, and Nikolsky. The winds will start out a little bit more from the south, 35 to about 50, and then start to pick up from the west, gusting upwards of 100 miles per hour as we get into late tomorrow night and into very early Wednesday morning. So it's going to be first in the central chain and then in the east. So this could bring some damaging wind gusts through your community. Tomorrow's the day to prepare, unless you can do, of course, a little bit of preparation tonight. The winds will come up and things will change fairly quickly, and those gusts will be very powerful, upwards of 80 to 100 miles per hour. So plan ahead for that. A lot of wind, a lot of snow, and again, a lot of water in some cases for eastern Norton Sound. Here's a look at what we see on the satellite picture. You can see the first wave coming out of the western Pacific. This is moving very quickly toward the north and western parts of the Aleutians. Up to the north is the cold, and this system here, once it passes your area, you'll be moving into more of a significantly colder weather pattern really for the rest of the week. So again, this is kind of a big page turner for all of our weather as we go through the state this week. As this system moves up out of the north and western Pacific and combines with the trough of low pressure moving out across the northern Bering right now, this will present some very strong winds to the central and eastern chain, continue the opportunity for snow and wind across the west coast, and this again will sweep across the Gulf of Alaska and into southeastern Alaska by the end of the week. Here's a look at the rest of the state. We already have one of these systems. It's kind of a little bit of a lower intensity system, but certainly a stronger system that was working across the Gulf in the last couple of days. This brought snow to south central and is now working across the Gulf and bringing in some stronger winds and some higher seas to the coastal areas. A little bit of rain as well as that system moves through. It's been kind of a wet and gloomy day for some parts of central and northern sections of southeast. Let's put this in motion, and you'll notice kind of the bubbling clouds there across south and western parts of the Bering, as well as Bristol Bay and north of Cold Bay. Those areas have actually seen some thunderstorm activity today. Wouldn't be surprised to see that continue again tonight. So we know that there's a lot of unstable air across the southern Bering that's moving through. This may also present an opportunity for some showers and thunderstorms across coastal areas in the marine zones as we head into the overnight hours for areas along coastal southeast. For the interior, we've seen some snow. In fact, a lot of places have reported snow and are expecting snow in the next several days. So if you haven't seen snow yet, or at least lately, your chance may be coming up here fairly soon. Watch the spiraling action. They're very close to Nome. That is the heart of this very powerful weather maker, full of cold air, full of moisture, and again, about to get a little extra oomph coming up out of the North Pacific. As all this combines across the central Aleutians, it will track across Bristol Bay, across Shelikof Strait, and move into the northern Gulf, again making an opportunity for more active weather toward the end of the week for southeastern Alaska, while presenting most of the interior with not only coming cold, but certainly some snow as well. So plan ahead. It's going to be a very interesting and perhaps a bumpy ride through the week. Here's a look at the weather chart. A 963 millibar low there with pockets of snow all the way across the northwestern coast, the Seward Peninsula and Kotzebue Sound, up in the Noatak and Kobuk Valleys and Koyukuk Valleys in southwestern Alaska. Showers and thunderstorms there north of the chain and the eastern Aleutians. And here's our other front moving across the eastern Gulf. This tracking eastward, running into high pressure and sending this northward. So it's getting a lot of support from all the systems all the way across Alaska. And again, it's very easy to lose track of just how big our state is, but this is a very massive storm, easily seen as you compare it across the northern hemisphere. At 975 millibars, it's the low sitting across the northern part of the Seward Peninsula, just south of Shishmaref later tonight, spreading snow across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. Across south and western Alaska, don't be surprised to see rain changing to snow there. An opportunity for rain and thunderstorms across the Bering Sea areas across the Alaska Peninsula coastline. And then we start to see the advance of that next weather system at 993 millibars working in from the west. That's the one that's going to bring the wind through the central and eastern chain beginning tomorrow and into Wednesday morning for the east. Low pressure still working just south of Yakutat and west of Gustavus. That's around 991 millibars. Pretty broad southerly flow out ahead of that. You'll stay mild and wet with that. Rain all the way across the northern coast until you get inland just a bit, and then there's a much better chance of seeing some snow showers in the region. Rain and snow showers may be found across the Alaska Peninsula, and just north of that, we expect that to be snow. And for some areas, that will be accumulating snow, about 4 to 5 inches around Kotzebue Sound and the Seward Peninsula, inland a little bit more into the Koyukuk and Noatak valleys, and even in the middle Yukon, you're talking about 4 to 5 inches of snow there. By Tuesday, the low pressure system across the Seward Peninsula still under winter weather advisories at 983 millibars. Coastal flood warnings continue there. You'll notice snow is spread a little bit further inland now, and it's starting to work its way into the upper Yukon there with high pressure in charge of Yukon itself at 996 millibars. Low pressure's moved in through British Columbia at 982 millibars. We've got a very flat flow across the Gulf. And you'll notice back to the west, our weather maker here is down to 977 millibars. That will be crossing through the central chain on Tuesday. High wind warnings are in effect at this point, and you'll see gusts coming up to about 80 miles per hour at their highs through the central chain. As that moves eastward, that will bring gusts to about 100 miles an hour tops around the eastern Aleutians as the low pressure system bottoms out to around 956. This is a powerful storm, and it's going to bring some changes through the Gulf as well, with strong winds working through south central and over Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, and across southwestern Alaska. But look what happens across the interior. While we'll probably get some stronger winds across the Alaska Range itself, we're going to start to see some drier weather for the Yukon Valley. Still looking at some snow across the south-facing slopes of the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys there. And then out across the west, light snow continues across the Bering Strait and wrapping into the western side of the system. Right now, it looks like in the Pribilovs, you'll probably stay on the warmer side of the system, so we're not looking for blizzards just yet, but it is going to be a close call with rain and snow mixing in and then probably changing over to some big wet flakes. But if things change just by a few miles, that could put the Pribilovs into more of a situation where you will be looking at blizzard conditions there. So be prepared for some changes and plan ahead just in case the forecast shifts the track of this low pressure system just a little bit further south and changes where you are in relation to that storm. That could mean a whole lot of different type of weather for you. Out across the eastern Gulf, again, strong southerly flow bringing some very wet and snowy conditions to the northern Gulf Coast. Right now it looks like mainly rain for most of southeast, with the exceptions being some of the higher terrain and passes there. That's Wednesday, so a whole lot going on. Here's a look at temperatures now. You'll notice 40s and 50s for most of southeast. Sitka at 47, Juneau in the mid-40s today, Yakutat 42, 30s and 40s for Prince William Sound, Montague Island around 41, 37 in Anchorage and Homer today, 18 around the Matanuska Glacier, 27 in Golcana, 26 in Fairbanks up north, Fort Yukon only 14, 20 in Barrow, 15 for Kaktovik, Wainwright checked in at 13, 30 in Kivalina and Kotzebue, and 34 in Nome today. A blustery day around eastern Norton Sound and 34 degrees up the coastline there, 31 around Kaltag, 32 in Galena, 34 around Amonic, and 29 in Bethel. As you head down the coast into southwest, you saw temperatures just above freezing for Dillingham and King Salmon. Lower 40s for Kodiak Island, mid to upper 30s for many parts of the Alaska Peninsula until you got down to Sand Point. That was 39, and then 36 around Cold Bay and Falls Pass, 38 in Unalaska, and 36 in Shemya. Overnight low temperatures where the air is the driest and clearest, it will be the coldest. Look for single-digit temps there. West of Fairbanks, temperatures warm up into the teens and 20s. Coastal areas closer to 30. Most of southeast in the upper 30s to lower 40s. Kodiak looking at 32. Same goes for Shemya. Barrow at 11, and south central in the low to mid-20s. High temperatures tomorrow in the 20s and 30s for south central. Kodiak Island in the lower 40s, with southeast in the low to mid-40s. A little bit warmer around Ketchikan, Craig, Klawock, and areas out toward the Dixon entrance, probably closer to 50. Across the north, teens there, 15 in Barrow, 18 in Kaktovik, Wainwright 19, and the Pribilovs in the upper 30s with 40s for most of the central and eastern chain. Southwest in the lower to mid-30s until you get a little bit further inland at McGrath at 28. Flying weather includes widespread IFR across many areas just north of the Bering Strait and along the Chukchi Seacoast. You'll have improving conditions as the day goes on around the eastern Norton Sound region, as well as the south-facing coast of the Seward Peninsula. IFR inland a little bit more, where some of that heavier snow will continue. And across the central and eastern chain, expect visibility restrictions there, not to mention turbulence as we go for southeast. MVFR for many areas across the inner coast. The outer coast should see some improvement through your day. Anaktuvik Pass, we expect to see VFR by the end of the day. Adigan Pass starting at IFR, but again looking for improvements as your Tuesday goes on. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass looking to move over toward marginal conditions through your Tuesday. Rainy Pass should see some improvements. Windy Pass, we expect to see VFR through your Tuesday. Isabel Pass expected to turn over toward VFR by the afternoon. Mentasta Pass, we expect marginal conditions to develop. Sonita Pass right now looks to be VFR through most of your day. Portage Pass, we're going to call VFR for your Tuesday, and Chilkoot and White Pass expected to go over to MVFR. No surprise that the surface freezing line is crawling back northward across the western coast, but here's the colder air just waiting to send that southward once again. Out across the west, you can see warmer air aloft trying to poke into the western chain, and it's still hovering across central and southern parts of southeast, where freezing levels are as high as 2,000 to 4,000 feet. Icing potential certainly there, with snow growing across the lower and middle Yukon Valley. Above 2,000 feet is where you'll find some occasional moderate there. That threat continues northward. And ahead of the next weather wave across the central and eastern Aleutians, above 2,000 feet, expect some occasional moderate there. Most of that is fairly high altitude. And for the central and southern parts of southeast, A slight chance for some icing there, generally above 4,000 feet tomorrow. The jet stream has the super highway of weather pointed right at western Alaska. You can see the wind speeds there clocking around 140 knots across the central chain tomorrow. That's a little extra oomph for that storm coming up out of the north and western Pacific. At 9,000 feet, you can see wind speeds climbing up to about 70 to 75 knots on the south side of that storm, but they're still going, moving across the western Gulf at 40 to 45 knots. And here's the open door for the cold, dropping southward 20 to 40 knots into the Bering Strait. For the eastern part of the Gulf and southeast, wind speeds there still upwards of 50 to 65 knots. So an awful lot going on at this level and at 3,000 feet. Winds are a little bit slower across southeast here. You can see the brief ridge building across the Alaska Peninsula, and wind speeds out across the western storm already at 60 to 65 knots with 80 knots on the north side of this. So again, just a little bit of a change in that track could really mean a big difference for the Pribilofs. Here's turbulence, and no surprise with high wind warnings for the central and eastern chain tomorrow. As we get to the late afternoon, we'll focus below 10,000 feet for isolated severe across the eastern chain. Below 4,000 feet for the central and southern parts of southeast. A little bit of chop there and up and down the west coast. Expect some problems tomorrow with occasional moderate below 6,000 feet all the way out toward Kodiak Island, where stronger northwest winds will continue. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with the rest of your marine weather in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, thank you to Alaska Public Media for sponsoring this program. We are glad you could join us this evening. We're very happy to have Jenny Paniotti back on the program to tell us about Women in Aviation International and her career in aviation. Welcome back to Hangar Flying, Jenny.
Thanks.
On our last show, we talked about the new Alaska chapter of the Women in Aviation International organization. Now, you don't have to be a pilot to be in the organization, but you are. Can you tell us how you got interested in flying?
So I think like a lot of people in Alaska, although I didn't grow up in Alaska, my dad is a pilot. So I grew up hearing about how cool it was and every so often getting to go for a ride. And it was something I just always thought would be fun, and I had the time, and I asked my parents and they were really supportive. So that's where it all started.
So you grew up on the East Coast, but you moved across the country to come to Alaska to fly?
Yes, I was finishing up school back in Boston, and I saw myself settling into a very boring suburban life and figured I would stop flying because those things go away. So when I felt particularly boring, I bought a one-way ticket and showed up.
And you didn't come to Anchorage?
I came to Anchorage at first, but I've made my way around the state a little bit. So I lived out in Southwest, and then I lived up in Fairbanks, and now I'm back to Anchorage.
And you did some flying out of Fairbanks?
Yes. So when I went up to Fairbanks, I got my flight instructor certificate at ProFlight, which I absolutely loved the school, and they offered me a job, and I worked up there as a flight instructor for the last few years.
Great. And in addition to your love for flying, I think you also must enjoy school. You have a degree in education, but you're currently working on another degree. What are you studying now?
I'm finishing up a mechanical engineering degree.
And you're doing that in Anchorage?
Yes.
So what are your long-term goals? How are you going to fit flying in with engineering?
So my long-term career goal is to work in engineering. But flight instructing for me, it was never intended to be a career. It's just something I've done because I love. I love teaching, I love flying, I love sharing that passion with my students. So for me, for as long as I enjoy instructing, I plan to keep on doing it as I have time.
I think that's fantastic. Some of my best instructors that I really enjoyed and learned a lot from were instructing because they wanted to, not because they had to. It wasn't their primary job, but it was something that they did because they loved it. And it sounds like you're going to be one of those instructors yourself.
Yeah, the day I don't enjoy it is probably the day I should stop doing it.
Do you have an area of instruction that you prefer, whether it's ground or primary?
So I really enjoy private instruction, which some people might call me crazy for that. But everything is new, everything is exciting, everything is a challenge, and I think as an instructor it's a lot more challenging to teach a private student. There are a lot more small details, feel things, that kind of thing, and when your students do reach those milestones, there's just that much more excitement, that much more pride. So.
Do you have a favorite type of airplane to instruct in?
I've only instructed in Cessnas and small Pipers, so I guess the 152 is not very fast, it's not very big, but it's kind of like a really slow sports car. So.
And do you think that you might get any additional ratings in the future or any certificates that might continue your education in aviation?
So when I was up at ProFlight, I had the opportunity to get a couple extra certificates just for fun, and I did, so I've got them in my back pocket if I ever need them. The only other one that's on my list of one day would be my multi-engine instructor. So.
Good for you. Going back to the organization Women in Aviation International, how have they helped you with your kind of dual interests?
So for me, when I was up in Fairbanks, I was instructing there for a few years, and I felt like I really became a part of the community. And you know, I would go to the airport, I would see friendly faces, I would know what's going on. And when I moved down to Anchorage this last spring, I didn't know anyone, I didn't know really anything about the aviation community. So by joining Women in Aviation, especially as someone who doesn't fly all day every day, it was a way for me to really still be involved, to get to know people, and just feel like a part of that community again.
Well, that sounds like a definite ringing endorsement for Women in Aviation membership. So thank you so much, and good luck with Women in Aviation International and with your schooling and your career.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy this program, I encourage you to become a member of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. This allows us to bring you programs like this. We appreciate your support, and we appreciate you tuning in to Hangar Flying. Until next time, remember, always file a flight plan and fly safely.
Thank you. We'll see you again on Friday. Here's a look at the marine forecast now for southeast. You'll have southerlies on the inside and westerlies on the outside. 30 knots up and down the outer coast with seas ranging from 11 to 15 feet just outside the Dixon entrance. 10 feet inside the Clarence Strait. That will be closer to the entrance itself. Otherwise 3 to 4 feet as you head up toward the Lynn Canal. As you get into Wednesday, look for the westerlies to continue along the coast, still running around 25 to 30 knots there, but look at the seas, 15 to 18 feet. Those are coming up for Wednesday. Across the inner coast, anywhere from 20 to 25 knot winds from the south and southwest with 4 to 5 foot seas there for your Wednesday afternoon. For south central northwesterlies remain light on the inside of Prince William Sound. Outside the north and western Gulf, you'll see winds coming up to 30 to 35 knots with 10 to 16 foot seas east of Kodiak. Inside of Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait and west of the Barrens, seas ranging from 8 to about 9 feet there with 2 foot seas in the northern part of the Cook Inlet with westerlies at 10 knots. For Wednesday, expect things to change with the strengthening of the storm out to the west. We'll start to see a response in the winds across the north and western Gulf. Inside of Prince William Sound, northerlies at 20 knots. Across the north and western Gulf, 35 to 40 knots for many areas there with higher gusts, 14 foot seas for many regions into the Barren Islands, and then even higher seas there east of Kodiak. 25 knots with a 45 knot wind from the south with north and easterly winds developing in Cook Inlet and west of the Barrens. 45 knots with an 11 foot sea and 18 foot seas inside of Shelikof. This will have an impact for anyone traveling, including the Marine Highway there. For the Alaska Peninsula, 35 to 40 knots on Tuesday. Not so bad, right? 15 to 20 knots on the Bering Sea coast and 17 foot seas there on the Pacific coast. Watch what happens on Wednesday with low pressure working into the region. Northwesterlies develop on the northern side of the Alaska Peninsula with higher gusts, 55 knots sustained and 25 foot seas. 70 knot sustained there south of Sandpoint and King Cove with higher gusts expected on Wednesday. Southwesterlies from Castle Cape to Chignik sustained at 55. So again, a big day on Wednesday. Plan ahead for this one because things will be rough and choppy throughout the day. Tuesday, big changes up and down the Aleutians. Remember, high wind warnings for the central and eastern chain for Tuesday and into Wednesday. South and westerly winds develop with 45 to 50 knots sustained with seas ranging from 17 to 19 feet, 21 feet around Kiska to Attu, and 14 to 24 foot seas there on the Pacific coast side, again with higher gusts. Here's Wednesday, and again, winds come up to about 65 knots for the eastern Aleutians, 50 knots from Nikolsky to Atka. Winds diminish in the west, and all day long winds will be improving throughout the entire region. But from about Tuesday night into Wednesday, it looks like the winds will be the worst from Nikolsky to Unalaska, where gusts on land could reach upwards of 100 miles per hour. So once again, high wind warnings in effect there. For Tuesday, for the west coast, west and northwesterly winds at 35 to 40 knots, seas ranging from 15 feet there around Nunivak Island, southward 16 feet into the Kuskokwim Bay. That includes the Pribilofs, also seeing a sustained wind around 30, up to 55 knots for Wednesday with higher gusts. And right now, again, it looks like that storm will be just far enough north that you won't be put into blizzard conditions, but conditions will not be nice. Northerlies coming across St. Lawrence Island and Nunivak Island, 20 to 30 knots with 13-foot seas in the Kuskokwim Bay region. Also looking at winds sustained at 45 with heavy freezing spray north and south of the Bering Strait. Northerlies outside of Kotzebue Sound, 25 to 35 knots there. Southwesterlies from Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik over the ice, and easterlies north of Barrow with a northeasterly wind coming down the Chukchi seacoast. Heavy freezing spray is a possibility there. Winds improve for Wednesday. Northwesterlies from Cape Lisburn to Point Hope with freezing spray in that region, and northerlies outside of Kotzebue Sound at 20 knots with a 7-foot sea. Winds diminish across the eastern Beaufort with a westerly flow around 10 knots for Wednesday. Here's a recap of the weather. A lot going on across the west coast tonight in the Seward Peninsula, where a winter weather advisory is in effect for many areas there. Tomorrow, you're looking at about 4 to 5, even as much as 7 inches of snow across the north and western regions. For the middle Yukon Valley as well as the Koyukuk Valley, expecting about 4 to 5 inches of snow there. And in eastern Norton Sound, coastal flood warnings continue. Those will continue through the daytime tomorrow. The worst of it is expected tonight, where seas could come upwards of 6 to 8 feet above normal high tide, with a 983 millibar low sitting right across the Seward Peninsula. Snow will continue as well for many in the west and spread eastward. As that wetter air moves eastward, expect more parts of the Middle Tanana Valley and southward and eastward to see a better chance of snow throughout the rest of the week. And significant cold will follow this. Low pressure working in through southeast, bringing more rainfall there. A strengthening storm system for the central and eastern Aleutians moves across the Alaska Peninsula and into the western Gulf by midweek, changing the game for everyone. Enjoy your Alaska weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.